I want to come to the fifth report risk that you mentioned. This is about Russia's second front. You talk about the possibility of more action between NATO and Russia, and the fact that it's not just restricted any longer to Ukraine, that even though if it's not a military offensive, but still there is more happening between Russia and NATO. So explain what you think is most likely to happen, and more importantly, how does NATO respond? Because I was reading that report where you think this is the year when NATO really pushes back. Is that hope, or there's more to your assessment than just hope?
There's a question of whether it would be NATO collectively, whether the U.S. would support it, but certainly NATO countries today, particularly frontline countries, the Poles, the Baltics, the Nordics, they are increasingly on the receiving end of very significant and escalating Russian asymmetric warfare. You just saw just this past weekend, that there was the Finns detained a Russian ship that was dragging anchor to disrupt fiber cables that were in the water. We've seen drones fly into Poland and Romania, weather balloons from Russia fly into Lithuania. We've seen drones disrupting airports. We've seen telegram payments from Russia going to individuals all over these countries to support vandalism and espionage and efforts to destroy critical infrastructure, even an effort to assassinate the CEO of the largest defense company in Germany. And NATO hasn't really responded to that. So now we see NATO countries talking about whether they would do offensive cyber operations against the Russians, whether they would send counter drones, whether they would send jet fighters to scramble in closer proximity to the Russians, military exercises in areas where the Russians are more lightly defended, all of that. And, the Russia-Ukraine war now, Rahul, has gone on for almost 4 years. And the Russians are losing a lot of people, and the Ukrainians are having a harder time defending. But, the markets have priced in the Russia-Ukraine war. The fact is that there is an asymmetrical war going on between Russia and the frontline NATO states, and if that expands, that is going to be far more dangerous. So that is what we think is the significant risk happening at a time that the Russians see that the Europeans are spending a lot of money on the war and on Ukraine, and the Russians want them to stop. The only way they stop is by breaking up NATO, breaking up Europe, and Trump is giving them more of an opportunity to do that. So that's where we see the escalation.
If Trump acts against Greenland, would that be the end of NATO? Or will they just stay with the alliance in the hope that you actually need America to ward off Russia?
Well, it's kind of interesting you asked that right after the Russia question, because, of course, if Trump were to invade NATO and seize it, that would be the end of NATO. But if Trump engages in a covert campaign to work with Greenland and try to convert Greenlanders to support the U.S., inducing them with money, but also political influence, if he has a more asymmetrical gray campaign the way the Russians might, for example, in frontline countries in NATO or in Moldova or in Georgia, it's very hard for the Europeans to say that's a bright red line, now we're leaving NATO. So, Trump is not going to make this easy for the Europeans at all.